Recording in progress.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this webinar today. This is a webinar under the CGIAR Food Frontiers and Security Program. It's one of the science programs in the CGIAR that focuses on working in contexts that are difficult, that are constraints, that face the most challenges in terms of climate, in terms of vulnerability, in terms of being sort of enclosed, relying on import of food and so on. And we are talking about fragile and conflict-affected settings. We are talking about island food systems. We are talking about as well urban food systems. The area of work under which this webinar is going on is about trying to learn on how to innovate, how to scale in these kinds of contexts that are a bit difficult. The topic today focuses on nature-based solutions as a way to address the climate vulnerabilities that communities face, as a way also of creating livelihoods for the communities. And specifically, we'll look at how these nature-based solutions can be scaled specifically in fragile and conflict-affected settings. So we have 3 sessions in today's webinar. The first one will be about why nature-based solutions matter, why is it important. The second session will be around what are the key innovations around nature-based solutions. And then the third session will dig deeper about experiences from the field and how we can really scale NBS in fragile and conflict-affected settings. Just to start off with introductions, my name is Jose Kamanda. I lead area of work on innovation learning, sort of a think tank under the Food Frontiers and Security Science Program. And I'm now going to introduce my colleague Walde Mekuria to tell us more about nature-based solutions and why they matter, especially in fragile and conflict-affected settings. Welcome, Walde. And I request Nilu to please share the slides that Walde will use.
Yeah, thanks, Josie, for the introduction, and also good afternoon, good morning, good evening, all. We are very appreciative for joining this webinar. I will give you just a short presentation on the nexus between refugee settlements and environmental degradation. So next slide, please, Nilu. So the focus of this particular presentation, a short presentation, is to tell you about the nexus between refugee settlement and environmental degradation. What does this imply for environmental and environmental and community resilience, and why nature-based solutions, and also to highlight the spatial insights that shows the vast potential suitable areas for piloting and implementing nature-based solutions in refugee hosting landscapes. The overall goal or purpose is just to provide data-driven context and examples, so just to inspire action. Next slide, please. So just when you look at the nexus between refugee settlement and environmental degradation, it starts with the human pressure. Or when a refugee or when people migrate from one place to another place, when there is an influx of displaced community, there is a human pressure on the environment. This leads to contribute to deforestation and also soil exposure around campus, and so we will be reduced deforestation and soil exposure, and then this will reduce the natural assets we have, such as reduce vegetation cover, lower soil carbon, and these are all the natural assets. And once we lose the natural assets, our ecosystems will be weakened. That means less natural erosion control capability of our ecosystems, reduced infiltration, and also lower water retention, and we can mention many. And this all together will lead to a more vulnerable landscape and around camps, which means the environment and the communities will be affected by natural disasters such as erosion, drought, flood, biodiversity loss. So overall, this means we just affected the entire landscapes, including the environment and the people. So what does this imply for resilience and the need for nature-based solutions? So we have the driver, the influx of displaced communities. This will lead to environmental pressure so that we have loss of woody biomass, loss of grazing land, loss of water resources, all these kind of things. And this will restrain livelihood for the refugees and those communities, which means we end up to scarce fuel wood, scarce pasture land, limited water supply, and many things. So this have a local impact such as diminished food and water security, and also increased competition over resource use, and also just heightened the competition or the relationship between refugees and communities will be more affected. So at the end, we will have eroded social resilience. So when you look all these environmental challenges and social challenges, nature-based solutions can have a potential to reduce, at least to contribute to address to break the nexus between refugee settlement and environmental degradation, because nature-based solutions are essential to recover degraded land and rebuild the lost resilience of the environment. And so interventions like tree-based nature-based solutions, water harvesting, conservation measures, ecological restoration, all can help restore ecosystem service, ecosystem functions, support sustained livelihoods, and also reduce resource conflict between refugees and host communities. This will facilitate a more resilient refugee host landscape. This is the reason behind why we are promoting or advocating nature-based solutions to break the nexus between refugee settlement and environmental degradation, so that we will have a more resilient environment and community. Next slide, please. So this is just to show you the nexus of some examples which we have done around the White Nile state in Sudan, how it looks like the land use land cover dynamics, comparing the time of establishment of refugee camps and also the land use land cover type in 2025. So these are the analysis made in 8 different campuses located in White Nile state. When you see the figures in the right side, generally what we learned is that the natural ecosystems such as shrubland, grassland, and also forest land decreasing with time since the establishment of refugees. At the same time, farmland, degraded land, and settlement will increase with time, which signals that we need to really act and restore, at least maintain or protect the natural ecosystem to have a resilient environment and community. Next slide, please. So this is just another example. Again, from the White Nile state, when we looked at the land degradation neutrality status, when you look at this also, the areas showing degraded conditions are increasing with time, and the areas showing improved conditions decreasing with time, which signals that, highlights that we need to really protect our natural ecosystems so that we will have a resilient environment and also a resilient community. Next slide, please. So it's not only problem, but when you see, we have also opportunities, because when you look at all these, the 3 states of Sudan, for example, Kassala, El Gadarif, and White Nile, which is the 3 top states hosting refugees or displaced communities, there are a lot of nature-based solutions which we can categorize as tree-based nature-based solutions, water harvesting, soil water conservation, or ecological restoration that can really help to address some of the problems such as problems related to water supply, problems related to fuel wood shortage, problems related to resilience building, problems related to livelihood diversification. All these nature-based solutions have the potential to contribute to address, at least to contribute to this challenge. And also we have large areas of land which is suitable, which we can pilot and implement the different nature-based solutions, which means we have a lot of opportunities to pilot, implement nature-based solutions, just so that we can break the nexus between refugee settlement and environmental degradation, so that we can have a resilient community and a resilient environment. Next slide, please. So the key takeaway message here is that refugee influx can stress local environment, which means large refugee settlement often contribute to deforestation and heavy resource use, which can lead to leaving the surrounding land bare and degraded. At the same time, environmental degradation undermines resilience of refugees and host communities because when forests, soils, and water are depleted near camp, both refugees and hosts become less resilient to natural disasters such as drought and flood, so that they can be affected. So the other important thing is we need to really prioritize nature-based solution because this tree planting, rainwater harvesting, soil water conservation measures usually help us to restore degraded land and strengthen the resilience of refugees and host communities by improving the ecosystem function. And also by promoting these nature-based solutions, we can have multiple benefits from restoring nature because nature-based solutions help bring back lost ecosystem services, functions, boost livelihood, and also reduce conflict over scarce resources. As just highlighted earlier, we have also a large potential suitable areas which we can pilot and implement or expand nature-based solutions so that we can really break the nexus between refugee settlement and environmental degradation. So the next slide, please. I will end up by showing the next steps. So, we have a good, we have seen the nexus between environmental degradation and refugee settlement and the implication to resilience, to the community and the environment, and also the potential we have to really introduce or pilot and implement nature-based solutions. But this is not an end. We have a number of steps which we should to pass to operationalize nature-based solutions in a refugee host landscape. The first thing is we need to map and also identify hotspots, which means conduct rapid spatial and field assessment around camp so that we can identify fuel pressure zones, degraded land, and water-stressed areas. This will give you, then we need to engage community from the start because we need to establish refugee host co-design platform. At the same time, we need to promote participatory planning, such as participatory forest management, user groups, and watershed committee. This kind of thing, we really need to bring the communities from the start so that we can co-design and implement interventions. So the third step is to design integrated nature-based solution package. And instead of going for single nature-based solutions, we can bundle nature-based solutions so that we can maximize the benefits. And also, we need to align interventions with local biophysical and socio-economic setting or conditions. Then we need to link nature-based solutions to immediate livelihood because all communities need to have a short-term economic benefits while waiting the long-term conservation benefits. So that we need to introduce fast return options, woodlot, fodder, food, cash. These kind of things are really very important. And then we need to pilot, demonstrate, and scale out. We start with pilot sites near camp, use demonstration plots to trigger wider adoption and replication. And then we need to again embed in systems and financing mechanisms. For example, we need to integrate into humanitarian response plans and local development plans. So this kind of thing should be integrated to the humanitarian response plans and local development plans for long-term sustainability. So we need to also work closely with key partners and leverage climate restoration and also nexus financing. Then at the end, it's about monitoring, learning, and adapting because we need to adapt. We need to just promote adaptive learning so that we can learn from our failure and success so that we can improve all our planning, implementation, and scaling with time. I think I stop here. Thanks very much for listening.
Thanks a lot, Walde, for setting the scene, telling us why nature-based solutions are critical. We'll have 3 presentations, and then after that, we'll have a question and answer session. If you look at the bottom of your screen, there's a Q&A icon. You can also put your questions there, and then we'll come back to it during the Q&A session. So now I would like to introduce the next panelist, Richmond Msowaya from UNHCR. Please introduce yourself and then make your presentation.
Thank you so much, Jose. My name is Richmond Msowaya. I'm basically based in Khartoum in Sudan, and I work with UNHCR. I'm the focal point for development, livelihoods, as well as solutions in Sudan. So my presentation basically will capture the pragmatic perspective of implementation of nature-based solutions in Sudan. And I will ask the one who is facilitating the slides to make a slide on the screen, if you don't mind, Jose. Do I do the slide myself?
Yes. Please share the slides, yeah.
Okay, thanks. Just a second.
You can
Are you
see
able
it.
to see my
Yeah.
but
Now
now
you put it in full screen mode. Yeah.
slideshow. Are you able to see?
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay, so thanks so much, Jose, and good afternoon, everyone. Good evening, based on the locations where you are hearing us from. So basically, I just want to give you a quick snapshot about Sudan because we are talking about nature-based solutions here. And Sudan is a context of displacement, and as you are all aware. We have around 4.5 million Sudanese that are living outside Sudan as refugees in countries such as Egypt, South Sudan, Chad, Uganda, Libya, and Ethiopia. So the largest number of displacement in this case is in Egypt, where you have around 1.3 million Sudanese living there. Then you also have around 586,000 living in Libya, about 1.3 in Chad, which is just next to Sudan. If you move across the Darfur region, then in the southern part, you have South Sudan hosting around 736. So there are others that have gone across as far as Uganda. If we're talking about the displacement context, in Sudan is shaped by a protracted crisis because this is a situation that has not only occurred in 2023, but before 2023, we also had similar, situations, but now occurring largely in the Darfur states. So if you look internally, apart from the figures that I've just mentioned of the population that are living outside Sudan, you also have around 8 million internally displaced populations living within Sudan in different states, moving from high crisis areas to relatively stable locations. And in addition to that, apart from having Sudanese refugees living outside Sudan, you also have internally some refugees from other countries that are also living within Sudan, especially in states that what they just area mentioned, Kassala and White Nile, that's plus Gadaref. That's where we have a largest population of refugees. So the number is above 900,000 in Sudan alone. And you also have around 1 million people returning to Sudan to see if they can, come back and stay. So they're coming back in different states like Khartoum, Jazila, White Nile, and other similar locations. So we are talking because we are talking about the humanitarian and environmental challenges in Sudan. Largely, we have flooding as one of also another key challenge that Sudan faces through the White Nile and its tributaries. We also have drought apart from flooding itself. So you can see that it's a combination of climate-related, issues in Sudan. In addition to that, my colleague Ode was also mentioned about deforestation, which is quite unsustainable and weakening the ecosystem. Deforestation is happening because of this constant displacement. And he has mentioned about refugees once they settle, not only refugees, but also internally displaced populations because they're moving from other locations to different localities. So as they're going there, there's also competition for resources like firewood. They would want to use the same forest for them to do the cooking and other activities to make sure that they meet their basic needs. So because they can use the same, they use the same for charcoal, the same for lighting at the same time. I mean for cooking, not for lighting. So in the course of displacement, you see that while others are, perceiving displacement in the context of a crisis, but you see entrepreneurs perceiving it as an opportunity too, because if you have a large population, initially you had a population that was very, very small, but now because of displacement, you have a bigger population. They see the market because the population groups that have come over there will also create markets. They will be looking for, moving around to look for basic needs. So to meet their basic needs, they will be demanding for things like food and other basic commodities that will be required on a daily basis. So for entrepreneurs, they will leverage that as an opportunity to also, do their business. So I think I've also mentioned about deforestation, charcoal, use of firewood, and so on and so forth. And the photo you saw here is a photo of Habub, which is a gigantic cloud that normally produces a lot of dust in the air. It's a phenomenon that does not occur in most places except Sudan, which also gives you an insight about the type of climate related issues that Sudan faces in the country. So in terms of response to such climatic situations, you'll find that different humanitarian agencies respond differently. How do they do that? As they're meeting the basic needs such as water, shelter, health, and food, plus non-food items, including education, you'll see that they will respond using different forms, including support to populations, local populations, through the early warning systems, because with capacity building of the local populations to respond to nature-based issues through early warning systems. And this we have seen with agencies such as WFP and the FAO supporting communities to respond to such issues, so they have information about what happened in the past, what is there now, and how can they respond to such issues in the future. There are other agencies that have been supporting communities through income-generating activities, but involving green value chains. Some of the areas that they are supporting communities with include climate-smart agriculture. Climate-smart agriculture in some states like Kassala, Gadaref, and White Nile, organizations like UNHCR through implementing partners, local and as well as international partners, have invested in solarization of farms, so that instead of the communities relying on rainfall that comes once in a year, they have to produce throughout the year. So in addition to climate smart agriculture, they've also invested in agroforestry, so supporting communities with nursery related activities so that they restore the environment. They've also supported with renewable energy initiatives, and all these interventions are reinforced through community structures. Because if some of you remember, when the war started in Sudan, most international agencies left the country. But who was left behind? It was the communities themselves that were responding to different issues on the ground. So leveraging on the same community structures, most of the interventions currently use these types of structures, such as community leadership. We have organizations that are led by refugees, by the host communities, by internally displaced persons who are leaders, who are leading, who understand the issues on the ground. So even in terms of nature-based solutions, that the people that understand the context very well, because they have stayed there, some of them have grown up there, they understand what used to happen in the past, what is there now, and they can even foretell what might happen in the future. So these are the best structures that we work with. But in doing so, when undertaking such type of various interventions, what happens is that we ensure that we promote social cohesion, or organizations promote social cohesion by having inclusive programming, what do I mean by inclusive programming? You ensure that refugees, IDPs, returnees, and host communities do or support interventions or respond to interventions together as communities. You don't isolate to say, okay, this particular intervention will target refugees only. This intervention has to target the host communities only, because all the communities are facing similar challenges. They are also competing for the same resources. So if you try to create divisions amongst, the different interventions that you are undertaking on the ground, what you are reinforcing is conflict. At the end of the day, you are not conflict sensitive, and you might exacerbate the challenges that are already existing on the ground. So this is just a simple photo that is showing you some of the interventions in terms of investments in climate smart agriculture. You can see that in responding to nature, using nature-based solutions perspective, you see that we have these solar panels installed with a control room and pipe that is abstracting water from the river there, the Nile River, into the ground. And this is a photo showing you the fruits of the harvest after investments. So climate smart agriculture, as you as all of you know, addresses a number of issues on the ground. Issues like access to food, because Sudan is really facing high food insecurity because of other states are captivated in war. Previously, we used to have Al Jazeera and Khartoum that used to produce a lot of food, but with the war, these things were disrupted. So the states that are stable are the ones that are cushioning the effect by ensuring that agencies invest there to ensure that communities have access to income, access to food. And using the same, they can access financial services and also have cooperatives. So we have cooperatives that are also formed in these states that are linked to financial services to ensure that they're able to support themselves and become less dependent on donor aid. And also inclusive programming makes sure that there's no competition on resources, and also reducing conflicts, as I just stated earlier. Then just to have a quick look at some of the photos, the investments, and the fruits of investing in site type of interventions. So reforestation initiatives are some of the investments that are also done in different states, which also promote income generating activities, but at the same time restoring the environment. So we are also, or agencies are also investing in community-led cooking models. What we have witnessed in the past is that when organizations are supporting communities with energy-related interventions, oftentimes most of the solutions were pre-designed. What do I mean? For example, if communities are using cook stoves, some intervention, some organizations would bring in maybe cooking stoves that they feel can address the challenges of the communities on the ground, but you find that acceptance by the community to use those stoves might be minimal. And at the end of the day, when the intervention ends, you find that communities are not using those energy cooking stoves. So the only way is to engage the communities themselves, lead the process of designing such type of cooking initiatives. And when they get the solution, then they make suggestions to you. And that type of solution becomes viable on the market, because then communities are able even to buy such type of initiatives, and you can end up scaling such type of interventions. So what is required when you are implementing nature-based solutions in a conflict setting like Sudan is ensuring that we apply what we call do no harm principles, and also use conflict-sensitive type of programming in responding to nature-based related issues. So also ensure that the structures are inclusive, supported by the communities themselves, either led by IDPs, refugees, returnees, and host communities themselves, but not forgetting women and the youth to take the central stage of all interventions. And this, at the end of the day, builds the trust and balances the interest of different community groups. So, but at the end of the day, you also need to adapt, making sure that as you monitor the interventions, you see the issues on the ground, see solutions, how they work, then also adapt accordingly. Because in a conflict setting, things can change so quickly. So you need to be as flexible and adaptable as much as possible to ensure that your interventions are sustainable. I think this is the end, and thank you so much for listening. Any questions? You come back after the third presentation. Back to you, Joseph.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Richmond. You spoke about the challenges, they are related to food, but also water, but also energy. So need to address all those together at the same time, but also the importance of engaging with local leadership in implementing these nature-based solutions. Thanks a lot. So the next presenter will be Tasnaim. Tasnaim, if you could share your slides, and then you will introduce yourself and tell us more about the practical challenges of implementing this on the ground and what your experiences have been. The slides are visible.
Yes.
Put it on full presentation mode.
Okay, can you hear me?
We can hear you. Yes.
Okay. Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. My name is Tasneem Jaffer, and I'm an urban manager and architect based, originally used to be based in Khartoum. And I'm going to give today some key insights about deploying nature-based solutions in Sudan's conflict zones and hosting communities. As Richmond just mentioned, Sudan is or has been the world's largest humanitarian crisis since the war broke out in 2023. And it's more of a compounded crisis because you have uh, Sudan was already home to over 1 million refugees from neighboring countries. And because of the war, millions of Sudanese became displaced, internally displaced, or refugees in neighboring countries. So Sudan has been divided into two large zones. So all of the major Sudanese cities are either within the conflict zone, so directly under conflict or in the danger zone, or they are considered safer zones, so they are hosting IDPs. All of this has increased the demand of resources. A lot of millions of people have lost their livelihoods, and there's huge pressure on the environment and food insecurity because of the current situation. And the war is still ongoing. So these realities and numbers keep shifting, but it's still a very large issue. So in 2025, we started or undertook a training of trainers in nature-based solutions for communities. And the objective was to focus on small scale projects or interventions in two states or in two cities, Kassala and Al Ubaid. And we wanted to use heritage and culture in so use it with nature-based solutions in order to address different challenges, location-based challenges, specifically environmental challenges like and in addition to livelihoods and urban development and food security. And we used a combined method. So we used social spatial development methods using placemaking. So we worked in public spaces, and we wanted to see how, or we wanted to work with communities to use public spaces as a place for implementing different types of nature-based solutions within the city, uh, within the main cities, because these are where most of the pressure was happening of the a lot of influx from IDPs and refugees. And we used permaculture to implement these different types of nature-based solutions. And we gave so it's more of a co-design or co-development project We provide the main methods, but the participants are a main part of implementing the training and also of co-designing the training and working with the training. So we give the main ideas, but then they choose a public space and they're part of the design of the solutions themselves based on their needs, their short-term needs and their long-term objectives in these different spaces. So we wanted to see, or through this presentation, we're going to have to see how the use of nature-based solutions in cultural public spaces can help build resilience in such complex settings. So Al Ubaid was the first city that we worked in, or we worked in them in parallel, but I'm going to talk about Al Ubaid first, which is the capital of North Kordofan state. Al Ubaid is in a very resource-rich location in central West Sudan, and it is a trade route from west to east and from north to south of Sudan. And it's a huge market for agriculture industries and livestock. And it's before we did the training, from the beginning of the war, 2023, until early 2025, it was under a complete siege. During the training, the siege was lifted, but right now, as we speak, it's under a partial siege, and it's undergoing shelling all the time. So even during the training, sometimes the participants would have to leave the classroom because there would be shelling on the city. And one of the main issues in Al-Ubaid is that the water resources and agriculture areas were outside the city. And so when we asked the participants to choose a public space, we expected them to choose an open public space, a shared area, maybe a water harvesting a pit. They have several ones in the city, but they chose a cultural center, which is Kordofan Arts Band Center. And in this area or this place is a social space that is a hub for different artists and the community itself. So it's a place where the community engage together in different activities. The users are very diverse. There are women, there are people with special needs, there are seniors and children, in addition to the main band that plays there. And even the activities are very also diverse. So these different users would be doing their side jobs, for example, selling tea or selling snacks, and then they will come and play in the band. And the space had different environmental issues. So there was a lack of sustainable water resource. There was flash flooding in Al Ubaid generally, and specifically around this site. So there was a lot of rainwater runoff around the site, and during the summer there was heat and drought. And so the objectives of the project was to improve stormwater management and increase the green spaces and incorporate these different cultural activities within an environmental framework. And so this is the design that we worked with them on. Tayoun did this design, and they added the different cultural activities, but they also added different types of small nature-based interventions, gardens, composting areas, and also a forest on the east side of the site to help reduce the rainwater runoff, and maybe create some type of water harvesting in this area. So during the training, there's a day that's done to mobilize the community in order to come and start supporting the project or start working on the project. So it's more of a kickoff of the project, and these are some of the images for the concepts that were the design for the space itself, how it's supposed to look. So in the implementation, a lot of people came from different villages around the city, even though, like I said, the situation was very dangerous. But they came and they started working together. They did the different cultural activities, and we found that this type of using these, for example, dances or bringing food together, all of this is a way for the community to still remain hopeful and really still remain resilient in this current situation. And they also helped each other start implementing the project. And this was ongoing for a couple of weeks after that. But then, like I said, the security situation started deteriorating. The second city or the second project was in Kassala, and Kassala is one of the cities that has been hosting, like they were mentioned right now, a lot of refugees even before the war. And after the war started, also hosting a lot of IDPs. And the participants chose a zoo for the implementation of the project. The Kasala Zoo is interesting because it also is more or less like a refuge for, it became like a refuge for animals from different parks around Sudan. They were restated into Kasala Zoo. And so the zoo itself is a multi-purpose space for that provides different benefits for the community, and these benefits are shared between the people and the animal and the plants, education, food provision, environmental services, and some of the challenges that we're facing at the zoo itself were waste management because you have a lot of solid waste coming, different types of waste coming from the animals, environmental pollution and lack of sustainable water management. So we had to find a way to create a sustainable ecosystem that utilizes these existing resources and align them with the different interests of all of these diverse stakeholders. And this was the design, and the design generally um, revision the space into a whole ecosystem. So all of the waste is managed within the site itself, and trying to generate food from the site, from inside the site, and also uh, having a compost preparation area where this compost can also be sold or used inside the site itself. So the challenges that we faced in both of these projects were security and sustainability because of the ongoing conflict. Like I said, and the security risks, these would disrupt the project implementation and also threaten the long-term viability of these projects. The legal and institutional complications of using public spaces because managing any revenue that would be generated in these spaces might face some issues um, because of the ownership of who can really use this revenue, and the different priorities which keep changing because the local communities have their own needs, pressing needs. For example, in Al Bayed, a lot of the deforestation because of the siege, there was no fuel, so people had to cut off trees. So even though Al Ubaid is very famous for the trees and people like trees very much, this had to change in the difficult circumstances of the war, and so this would directly affect the environment. And some of the lessons learned was that cultural heritage can provide communities with a vital coping mechanism during times of conflict and difficult times, right, like these. And that's why when we integrate the nature-based solutions with cultural activities or cultural spaces, this can help not only reduce stress induced by the conflict, but also help these different communities and stakeholders really feel ownership towards these projects and be more invested to develop them and overlook them short and long term. And having more small scale initiatives can also be a practical solution so being more targeted nature-based solutions and having small scale initiatives that are dispersed around the city. For example, in Al Ubaid, we saw that they started building community gardens in the city and sharing food through these gardens. So this type of initiative really helped them, first of all, increase the food insecurity, and it's a low risk and it doesn't need a lot of resources. So it can be a practical type of solution that's used within the city, and it can be rescaled to different scales depending on the circumstances, and trying our best to align the priorities of the communities with the environmental issues. Using nature-based solutions can also help improve food security and resilience in conflict-affecting settings. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Tasnim. So now we have a session for Q&A. I would ask the panelists to please put on their cameras as we go to the Q&A session. We already have some questions in the Q&A. The first question is for Walde. You showed some trends on environmental degradation over time in and around refugee settlement areas. So could you give an example of where a nature-based solution has helped reverse or slow this kind of degradation? And what would be the main lesson from that experience?
Yeah, thanks, Josie. And this is just a good question, because we don't talk only problems, but also solutions. So I didn't cover this because Richmond and Tasmin, and also we will hear back in the second section also some practical experience how nature-based solutions supported to address some of the challenges of refugee centers communities. But I can give you one example, for example, from the Somali region of Ethiopia, where 5 refugee camps are located around the Ganali Dawa River. UNHCR and WFP jointly are implementing solar-based irrigation practices there, and also cultivating more than around 2,000 hectares of land, which really produced a lot of different type of crops. And also both refugees and host communities are benefiting in terms of achieving food security and also improving water availability. At the same time, there is a natural resource management activities going on around there. Through that, especially through the establishment of exclosures, which is one of the nature-based solutions, they really reduced the degradation of shrubland and also restored the degraded ecosystems. And so that the key lessons from that is it is always community-owned, just inclusive, as Richmond said, and also participatory approach will be a good approach to this kind of thing, because this natural resource management or the implementation of nature-based solutions really wants collective action. It's not really implemented by one sector office or by a specific community. It really needs collective action, so that inclusive approach, participatory approach, engagement of local communities and all stakeholders from the start is a key approach to really success, to achieve a good success and sustain the benefits that come out from such kind of interventions. Over to you, Jess.
Thanks, Walter. Richmond, there's a question for you regarding the choice of plant species that you use for restoration in different contexts. You know, like there's flood-prone areas, there's degraded lands, there's riverbanks. So what criteria do you use, for the different kind of areas to decide on what kind of species that you go for?
Thank you so much, Jose. I think I would answer from the practical, from a humanitarian development actor perspective. But basically, when we are doing these interventions as an organization or as humanitarian agencies, UN, INGOs, and others, we engage with the technical expertise from the government itself. For example, we have the Minister of, in other countries, there's a Minister of Agriculture. But in Sudan, there's a Minister of Production and Economic Resources. So we have extension workers, expertise in different areas that we're talking about in terms of agroforestry. So we engage them, that the ones that build the capacity of the beneficiaries that we target. And they identify the type of species that are feasible in locations where we're doing interventions. In this case, we have Kasala, Gadare, and the White Nile. But in addition to this, we also encourage fruits for purposes of, nutrition within their communities where they are staying. So and also the preference that it depends on the fruits that are also preferred in those types of locations. So I would answer in that context in terms, because it's a technical thing that is done by technical expertise within the field in the states where we're targeting beneficiaries. Back to you.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. So I'll go over to you, Tasnaim. There's a question around access to land. In these kinds of settings, there are challenges with land and natural resources. So in the areas where you operate, how is land access and land use rights handled in your interventions? Considering the refugees, the internally displaced persons, you also have the host communities. So how do you manage working around land issues?
Okay, thank you for the question. And that is, I think, the main issue, usually in public space or in general in conflict settings, is working with land. Both projects that we undertook were I think that's also one of the reasons they chose these spaces, because they're controlled and they have a clear ownership or a clear body that's managing them. So for if it's the zoo or the other the band social space, they're both managed by uh, different entities, or they're owned by different entities. So, and these, but they're at the same time, they can be used by the community. But it's a clear ownership that you can talk to or take permission from to work within these spaces. So this solved the issue in both of the cases that we worked on. But in other cases, for example, there was a case study in Al-Fula in Al-Ubayd, which is a huge harvesting pit. Uh, they the local government is responsible for the land, so it designated the different plots around the Fula and rented them out to different community members. So um, this is the way that they solve the issue. In the end, in Sudan, all of the land is owned by the government, except if it's registered otherwise. And so going through different governmental entities before um, implementing any projects is very important.
Thank you very much. There's a question that has been recurring from a lot of the participants. We are talking about fragile and conflict-affected settings where sometimes there are issues to do with governance. There may not be stability, in that sense. So the question is, how do you, ensure that these nature-based solutions are sustainable? How do you manage to work with local governments? What are the mechanisms overall for making sure that these are able to sustain beyond the life of the project? So it's to everyone. Maybe all of you can, give your own responses there.
Maybe I can start.
Go ahead, Walde. Thank
you. Yeah, I think this leads us to the next actions, which is the next step, which I presented like the 7 steps. But the key thing here is just like maybe I can mention the 4 key things here. The first thing is to ensure community and stakeholder engagement from the start. As Tasmin also said, we need to embed on the community there. Also, Richmond also mentioned that. This will help us to facilitate the co-design of all innovations, because it is not imposed from the external body, but it's co-designed, co-selected, co-piloted, and co-monitored and co-evaluated. So if there is a benefit there, communities will automatically uptake that one. And also, it's really it's also good to have attach or embed a livelihood benefit, short-term economic benefit, all kind of nature-based solutions, because most of the nature-based solutions they give fruits after 5 or 10 years. But if you ask them, the community to wait all these years to benefit something that may not work, even under normal condition. So we need to embed some kind of short-term, which you can generate short-term economic benefits. So the other important thing is we need to embed into system. So this nature-based solution should be part of the humanitarian response plan, because UNHCR, WFP, IOM, all have their humanitarian response plan. In their plan, there should be an environmental aspect, and which they can really promote environmental protection, environmental restoration, so that we can protect our environment while saving lives. So because they are also moving from life-saving to life-changing programs, all UNHCR and WFP, IOM. So really we need to embed to systems so that we can really sustain, promote, and pilot and sustain this kind of interventions in that difficult conditions. Over to you, Jess.
Thanks, you, Walde. Tasnim, any thoughts on that? There was also a question around cultural values. The intervention you showed is, implemented in a place that is a cultural center. There is art. Was there any benefits of, operating within that cultural center in terms of, getting people to really, relate to the nature-based solutions? Yeah.
Yeah, I think both questions are related. So, like I said, it's more about, also like Walter just mentioned, it's a lot about aligning the priorities of the people. So we use the cultural aspect as a mechanism for example, for them it was a way for mobilizing the community and for really being positive, so coming together and sharing their cultural activities, and then the intervention of the nature-based solutions within this context uh, gave them a sort of pride and a feeling that it's part of it's something that they're doing together. It's something they're doing to improve the space that they like. So aligning these different types of priorities using the culture was pretty beneficial, and also for them to have ownership. I think this is also an issue with the Lubaid, where when they did this within this a space that they already like and they already feel proud about, and they combined it with their cultural heritage, for them they have ownership towards the project, and this is also really help the project be more sustainable and sustain long-term benefits, because when the people feel that they own the solution, this is not something that's being done by someone else. They're the ones who own this project. They're responsible for growing it, for changing it. They have the tools that can help them really benefit from it, and also mixing, like Walter just mentioned, the short term with the long term benefits. So you have short term wins, like for example, we suggest, for example, a Miyawaki forest, which is a forest that grows. It's a fast growing forest, and it's grown in different levels. So first you grow trees that are, so it's a mix of different types of trees, some that grow fast and have that can be used for direct, very fast winds, and then you have more trees that you grow in integration with these that will benefit in the long term. So you have to mix both of them together.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. We have a few more questions in the chat, but we will collect those, and respond to them, and then we'll share with the audience the responses to all the other questions. So thanks a lot, Tasnaim. Thank you, Walden. This leads on to the next session, where we now talk about how do we implement at scale. And I'd like to introduce our panelists. Mayor Tala, if you could put on your camera, and then Thomas Wilson as well. Yeah, so maybe we start off with introductions about yourself and the organization and the work that you're interested in. Let's start off with May.
Good afternoon, everyone. So my name is May Atala. I'm an economist and researcher in scaling and partnership at IWMI, International Water Management Institute.
Thank you.
So should I leave Thomas for introduction, or should I start?
Yes. Let's start off with Thomas' introduction as well.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for inviting me. My name is Tom Wilson. I'm the program coordinator for climate action for IOM, International Organization for Migration, based and covering Iraq. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'll start off with you, Thomas. From your experiences with the International Organization for Migration, on one hand, there's the need to meet the immediate humanitarian needs, but at the same time, there's a need to also look at how people, get out of the need to constantly require those immediate emergency needs and build long-term resilience. So how are you able to integrate nature-based solutions, to kind of help you transition from that, the immediate needs kind of situation to the longer-term resilience? Yeah.
Sure. Thank you for the question. I think it's a very prominent one in our sector, particularly coming from those working in the humanitarian emergency response sector, whilst also trying to achieve climate action objectives. To answer it, I'll start a little more broadly by saying that climate action objectives can still be achieved in fragile and conflict-affected states during that humanitarian crisis. But it requires shifting away from the traditional linear approach that we've been previously working in. And this is coming from the initial shock to response, recovery, and development. And I think we see that nature-based solutions are typically relegated to the final development phase only. The previous examples that have been given on the presentations are fantastic of how this is being achieved. But historically, I think, particularly in the context of Iraq, we've seen this coming much later. So rather, we see it as a more circular approach is recommended, where the efforts are continually implemented and constantly evolve alongside the context. As we see in fragile and conflict-affected states, they often struggle to proceed through the steps of this linear approach, and often they operate in cyclical timeframes of reoccurring crises and instability. However, we do see growing recognition of this, and we see through such guidance of MBS inclusion in the sphere standards, sorry. But of course, more donor support is needed to enable these approaches in practice. The humanitarian sector is apt at operating in and navigating through these insecure and developing and evolving contexts. And this is a strength that we should leverage. By pairing nature-based solution approaches with those of humanitarian agency operational capacity, we can still achieve climate action objectives in fragile and conflict-affected states. Additionally, we can see that the lack of climate and water resilience in the environments that we're working in often acts as a conflict multiplier, and certainly has human mobility displacement considerations. So efforts towards building resilience in these areas can make real progress towards ending this reoccurring cycle of conflict and recovery that we see in these contexts. So if I bring it to Iraq and our experience, so in Iraq and the Kurdistan region, we've seen these challenges and these approaches very clearly. So we're now leveraging blended climate finance to build resilience in vulnerable communities to the impact of climate change and water stresses through nature-based solutions, whilst Iraq still struggles to engage with that traditional development of vertical fund model that I've mentioned due to its perceived instability and location along that previous path that I've mentioned. So the first example I'd like to provide in the Kurdistan region of Iraq, which is in the north, this area still hosts displaced populations, and we're developing managed aquifer recharge approaches to reduce flood events and replenish groundwater for drinking and agriculture, which is supporting both food security and the livelihoods connected with it. By working with farmers to improve their agricultural practices, we're introducing farmer field schools and training for zero tillage approaches to improve soil moisture retention, which also supports drought management and reduces the environmental impact on soil degradation. So with increased water availability and soil moisture retention, we're then restoring rangelands and supporting pastoral livelihoods and biodiversity conservation within that catchment. The relationship between climate change and human mobility is also very clear in Iraq, as evidenced by our displacement tracking unit, which has tracked over 180,000 persons displaced by climate and who remain displaced. So we target these areas of forced displacement that we've seen, and we're supporting farmers to maintain their livelihoods by adaptation training around their agricultural practices, ultimately to achieve more with less. So here, of course, I'm referring to water scarcity due to drought and degraded water quality due to salinity and desertification. The adaptation I've mentioned takes place through improved irrigation practices, crop choices, and planting techniques, and also expanding market opportunity in the private sector. This model, the model of this is generally through our individual livelihoods assistance program, coupled with community-based programming approaches, climate risk awareness sessions, and community resilience building through environmental infrastructure innovation. One great example, I think, of this is we've recently commissioned a constructed wetland project in the marshlands, which is in the south of Iraq. And this treats contaminated sewerage water through reed beds, which not only provides clean water for the environment and livelihood opportunities, reduces desertification, but also supports biodiversity protection and the potential for expansion around carbon capture. So sort of in summary, I think operationalizing this integration would require clear frameworks that balance immediate humanitarian needs with longer term resilience and climate action outcome. Obviously, the machine for this, or the model for this, is through nature-based solutions. So humanitarian organizations must adopt phase approaches where rapid NBS interventions, like I mentioned, rainwater harvesting, constructed wetlands, fjord management, for example, needs emergency support within the first few months and builds the foundation for resilience and investment maturity over the following months and years. This demands blended financing, understanding from the donors that combines humanitarian, climate, and development funds together. Iraq's a model that's pioneering this, the example that I gave through the GEF. Operationally, this means embedding environmental expertise in humanitarian response teams, having that first vision of what's required in the coming years, and designing scalable community-led management systems, crucially convincing donors to adopt adaptive measurement frameworks that accept longer payback periods and challenging contexts. The institutional barriers to scaling are often greater than the technical ones. I think we clearly understand the technical benefit of nature-based solutions, and this needs to be scaled and advocated for. We need to shift from rigid project timelines and outcome-based agreements that recognize resilience building in fragile contexts ultimately reduces future humanitarian costs, whilst still achieving the climate action objectives at the same time. This, of course, I'm talking about UNFCCC and Sustainable Development Goals. So boxing activities into that previous linear stage approach is outdated, inefficient, and unsustainable. In an ecosystem-based adaptation approach, these nature-based solutions are beginning to thrive in fragile and conflict-affected areas. As I've mentioned, Iraq is trying to pilot. However, we need more recognition by practitioners, donors, and governments to prioritize and scale up actions to maximize sustainable impact. Governments must be encouraged to adopt nature-based solutions and through these into the national standards so that policy is not a barrier to sustainable approach and opportunities are not missed to build back better. I'll stop there. Just thank you for the time to present this, and maybe for the interest of the audience, you might be interested to read our report recently published on the relationship between biodiversity change, climate impact, and the relationship between biodiversity loss, climate change, and human mobility in Iraq. And this highlights the push and pull factors that we've been discussing. This is available online, and I think it might be interesting because we use it as partially an evidence base, an advocacy piece, an approach that I think other countries and contexts could replicate to build that advocacy required to focus on nature-based solutions in these contexts. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Very good point that, we sometimes look at humanitarian, context vis-a-vis development as two different things. But these things often happen in the same space. A context that is more stable could, in the next 6 months or so slip into, a humanitarian situation. So good to look at, both of these interventions in tandem. Very good point also on integrating environmental, practitioners into humanitarian kind of programs as well. There's a time I was working for Save the Children as a food security and livelihoods advisor. And each time I met someone, they asked me, are you a humanitarian FSL advisor or are you a development FSL advisor? And I said, I'm both. So it's really not two different things. It's one and the same thing. Thanks a lot. So I'll invite now May to also talk to us about, how do we move, how do we scale in these kinds of settings. So my question to you is, what policies and partnerships are needed to scale nature-based solutions in these fragile and conflict-affected settings? For example, how can humanitarian and environmental actors collaborate to overcome capacity gaps and also to address some of the institutional barriers?
Thank you so much, Jose, for your question. So in many fragile and conflict-affected settings, the challenge is not the lack of nature-based solutions. We have heard today from the speakers that there are already proven examples of climate-smart agriculture, community-based nature resource management that work and deliver impact on the ground, environmental impact and livelihood impact. The harder question is how to scale them. So from my experience at working at Al Muruna project at IWMI, International Water Management Institute, we work on scaling nature-based nature-based water solutions in Egypt, Jordan, Lebanon, and Palestine. So while these are not FCAS context in the strict sense, but they offer a useful point of comparison because many conventional scaling approaches rely on conditions that are absent in fragile settings. So to illustrate that, I would like to focus on 4 dimensions that are central to any scaling effort: partnerships, institutions, evidence, and finance. So I will start with partnerships. So who we can partner with in a fragile context. So the first challenge in this context, it's fragmentation. So humanitarian actors focus on immediate needs. Environmental actors, on the other side, they focus on ecosystem restoration. And development actors focus on livelihoods. So each addresses a part of the problem, but resilience depends on how all of these systems work together. So this needs real collaboration. And real collaboration, it's not just coordination, but it means joint diagnostics of the site from day one, shared planning, pairing environmental restoration with livelihood or protection outcomes from day one. And also it means planning for different time horizons together, because humanitarian actors address usually immediate vulnerability. Environmental actors help to reduce future risk. So this time difference in time horizon should be taken into account. And additionally, in partnership choices, there is risk in FCAS settings. So partnering with one actor can sometimes be perceived as taking side, or can affect access or neutrality or community trust. So this should be taken with caution. At the same time, partners themselves are not stable over time because local authorities change or camp structure can be reorganized. Some NGOs can lose access. So partnership models that are used in conventional settings need to be adjusted and adapted to FCAS setting and also resilient to institutional change in that setting. So that brings me to my second point about institutions. So institution durability does not depend on one single champion. So the second challenge is who will carry the solution forward once the project ends. In conventional settings, scaling often means embedding a solution within a ministry or financing mechanism in a financial institution or a planning process. But in FCAS, those same institutions can be unstable and governments changing, agencies are withdrawing. So as a result, the scaling strategies should avoid relying on one single institutional champion and relying instead on community level structures, starting from on the ground, because they provide a better continuity than formal institution and can help sustain solutions over the long run. And beyond the institutions themselves, scaling also requires policy framework that recognize nature-based solutions as mainstream in water, land, and resilience planning rather than a standalone environmental project. Because without that policy integration, successful pilots will remain pilots that are dependent on individual projects rather than becoming a part of a long-term resilience that can be delivered at scale. The third point that I would like to mention to answer your question is about evidence. So in conventional scaling, we need evidence, but scaling approaches, evidence in the conventional scaling approaches, they assume the ability to go to a site and revisit it again and again to build a multi-year baseline and measure and track.
Is it me or we lost her?
We lost her, I think.
Lost her, yeah.
I think my Zoom restarted. To hear me?
You're back. Yes.
You're back now. Yeah, yes.
Okay, so sorry for this technical problem. I don't know why it restarted. So yeah, that brings me to my third point about evidence and scaling. So conventional scaling approaches, they, let me repeat this point again if it broke. So it assumes that you can reach a site and revisit it to collect data build multi-year baselines, measure change over time, and track change. But in FCAS, the continuity and the access can change overnight. And that means that evidence systems need to change and to adapt to this setting. So this could be done by the use of proxy indicators and remote sensing that allows project to make informed decision even when there is imperfect information and that data sets are incomplete. So my last point about scaling in FCAS setting and the challenges that we face is finance. So in Al Maruna project, we have explored the scaling pathways that engage the financial sector, the commercial banks, and build a business case for MBS. But those approaches assume a functioning financial institutions, a clear land tenure that can work as collateral, for example, and stable counterparts that can engage in several years agreement. So these conditions are challenging in FCAS. So that's why the financing mechanisms, finance is a big part of scaling, should take these challenges into account and should bridge humanitarian response with climate adaptation, with long-term development, which will have a greater flexibility and risk sharing between private and public fund that is higher than the conventional financing models. So yeah, based on the four dimensions that I mentioned, I think we could be able to solve the challenges that we can face when scaling a nature-based solution and when to have a greater impact. So if there is one message that I will leave you with in scaling nature-based solutions in FCAS setting, it's not simply about replicating a successful intervention. It requires, as I said, the four dimensions: the finance, partnerships and policy, evidence, and institutions that requires humanitarian, environmental, and development actors that work together on not in parallel, but together in a shared work. And if this happens, if we can accomplish this, then MBS can drive long-lasting benefits and resilience. So thank you. Over to you, Jose, and I'm happy to receive questions.
Thank you very much, May, for those the four pillars that you've described. So if there are any questions, please put them in the Q&A. Also, you could also raise your hand. At the bottom, there's a react button. If you choose raise your hand, then I'll be able to see your hand and ask you to voice your question. There was one question for Thomas regarding Iraq's situation, where the arid climate, worsening water scarcity, and so on, and maybe people still growing some of these water-intensive crops. Are there specific policies or technologies or farmer level practices, that you've seen from your experiences that are being promoted to shift a bit from, water intensive crops or to more water efficient crops or, production systems? Yeah.
Absolutely. I've briefly answered that in the chat, but I think, aside from what we've discussed here, I think the academia and science from the international community, as we're all part of, or the technical community, is quite clear. The challenge, I think, would be based on government policy and strategic planning, which is there. And so the government of Iraq, through its Ministry of Agriculture, Ministry of Water Resources, and Ministry of Environment, are supporting farmers in that adaptation through incentivizing different crops. And so the government here still supports through a yearly agricultural investment plan and promotes better irrigation practice by supporting those who have adopted more efficient irrigation methods, such as drip irrigation. The common practice has previously been flood irrigation, which is obviously terrible for water losses and environmental impact, particularly soil saturation. However, I think with government policy, that it's never enough, and it needs to go further. There's areas such as we're seeing this year of being encouraged to implement rice production, which isn't great for the water that has been received in the national catchment. It will deplete the strategic water storage that Iraq has gained from a rainy season much quicker than it will if other agriculture was planted that year. So this ultimately is politics, and of course, politics is a challenge for the context that we work in. And I would say, therefore, politics is more connected to policy than anything else. It's not necessarily a scientific solution. And I think that remains the biggest challenge for the work that we're trying to achieve. Would be policy. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't see any questions in the Q&A specifically for this panel. So maybe some closing remarks from my end. We've heard a lot about, the importance of NBS in addressing climate issues and, improving livelihoods as well. We've also heard that the issues are not just about food, they're also about energy, also about water and so on. So there's the need, the point that May also made about the different sectors really needing to work together. Having partnerships that are not fragmented, like focusing on one particular issue, but looking at how these things can be thought about, by stakeholders from different sectors. And then also from the presentation from Tasnim, and Richmond, we had about the need for engaging with local leadership, the need to, create that harmony, building on existing structures is quite critical, and then embedding some of these programs within government, facilities. Then in the last session also, issues around scaling, not looking at HDP as, one linear kind of path. You have humanitarian and development needs occurring simultaneously, more often than not. And so the need for programming to address these issues, in tandem, looking at those both sectors. And technical experts also, focusing on these two issues together. So I want to thank all the panelists, also for this session. I would request that we all put on our cameras so that we have a group photo before we end this session. Nilu, I'll ask for your help to capture the image.
Give me a few seconds.
Okay.
Okay, say cheese.
Cheese.
Great, thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a good day, good evening, good afternoon, depending on where you are, or good night. Thanks a lot.
Thank
Bye.
you, Jose. Bye.
Thanks a lot, Josie.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Yeah.
Bye.
Thanks.